All right, folks, thanks so much for coming to folks who are watching live, to folks who are watching on the recording. I'm so excited that we get to spend this time together talking about this really important topic. My name is Ken Schneck. I am the editor of the Buckeye Flame. If you do not know the Buckeye Flame, we are Ohio's statewide LGBTQ publication. And so we're so proud to be able to bring you this event in partnership with Plexus, LGBTQ and allied nonprofit here that's, I just say, is Ohio's LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce, though technically Cleveland and Northeast Ohio. And we are so grateful for the generous funding of the Gay Community Endowment Fund and the Akron Community Foundation for supporting this time together. We are here to talk this evening, or whatever time it is when you're watching this, about the cost of doing good. The fun part is we actually did this exact panel a couple of years ago. We did it in February of 2020 and had all of these grand plans about what everything was going to look like. And then all of those plans went away. And so I'm so excited that we get to revisit this tonight with one of the same panelists and two new panelists. So let me introduce folks to you all just joining us, and so happy she's here. Siobhan Boyd Nelson is the Deputy Director of Equality Ohio, which is, of course, Ohio's statewide LGBTQ advocacy champions. And when we did this together last time, Siobhan, you on February 4th, 2020, you were the Director of Development, just reminding you what was going on in your life. Thanks for being here, Siobhan.
Thanks for having me, Ken. So happy to be here.
And we have Nancy Mendez. Nancy is the President and Chief Executive Officer at Starting Point, which is an organization here in Cleveland and has influence in surrounding counties as well, leading experts in quality childcare, early education, and out-of-school time resources in Northeast Ohio. Nancy is also, I think, on about 147 boards last time I counted, and is just doing such heroic work in this realm. Thanks so much for being here, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
And finally, John Garofalo. John is the Vice President of Community Investment at the Akron Community Foundation. And if you do not know, in addition to helping us put on this event tonight, the Akron Community Foundation brings together individuals, companies, and nonprofits. They bring them all together to make a permanent impact on the community. John, thanks so much for being here.
Ken, happy to be here and joining the other panelists. Looking forward to it.
All right, we're jumping in. It's a little bit of a different landscape, Siobhan, than when we last did this on February 4th, 2020. But I wanted to start, let's start from that 36,000 foot view, that flying altitude, and just talk about general philosophies to fundraising. How do you just generally start with philanthropy? Siobhan, will you start us off?
Sure. Wow, that's a big question because philanthropy can mean so much. And I like to think of it as resource generation rather than just fundraising dollars. And so that is anything that generates a resource for the organization that increases the organization's capacity and ability to do its work. Now, I want to be very clear. Cash is king. Dollars help us do that. We are in the business of building relationships, having conversations, changing hearts and minds. And you do that with people, and you do that by funding their salaries. But I think that really it can be so much more than that. It is about how we generate resources to fund the mission of the organization. And that often can look like something other than cash. I definitely want to talk about engagement, volunteers, folks giving of their time, because all of those things really do actually translate into dollars down the line for our nonprofit organizations. So if I could give a 30,000 foot view, I would say, let's think about philanthropy as more than dollars. Let's think about it as all the ways we put our love for community into action. And that can look a lot of different ways.
Awesome. Thank you. How about for you, Nancy, when you're doing that bird's eye view, how do you wrap your mind around it?
Well, I really do also, when you're working for a nonprofit like I am right now, it also is about looking at the different types of resources that you can bring in. and wanting to have a nice mix of dollars. Yes, I do have some, like, for example, government contracts, but when it comes to the foundations, it's really about giving you flexibility to be innovative, to pilot, and to really look at changing how you do the work. Government dollars and some other types of revenue streams don't allow that. But those relationships you build with the organizations in that love to hear about the latest research, those are like really important, great dollars that help you change the way you provide that service. So building those relationships with program officers in the different foundations is incredibly important.
Awesome. Thank you. How about for you, John?
And I come with this at a different perspective because I have been a fundraiser and I was a fundraiser for 20 some years. Now I'm on the other side of the fence of giving away the money. And I can tell you, and Nancy kind of hit it on the head, it's all about building relationships. Giving away money is no different than raising the money. As long as you have that solid relationship with the donor, with the funder, things usually fall into place. We think of it more as friend giving as opposed to fundraising. It's one of those things where building your network, building your relationships is going to benefit you in the long run, whether you're looking for money or whether you're seeking money.
Awesome, thank you. And folks can put questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to them as we have time. And actually, John, that's a nice transition. I want to start with you as someone who is receiving appeals on the receiving end. Talk to us about what catches your eye. I mean, certainly, yes, we hope that the relationships are there, but as you are receiving pitches or appeals, what do you recommend to folks? It was the number one question that we got of, like, just tell us exactly what to say to get money, John. So if you could please tell people exactly what to say to get money.
Sure, and I'll come from a perspective of, I oversee the Gay Community Endowment Fund for the foundation. So we were, just in context, we were the very first LGBTQ fund in the state of Ohio 20 years ago. The fund has now grown to over $2 million, and we give out about $50,000 in grants each year. So I work very closely with those grantees. I encourage them to pick up the phone and call me, to have a conversation with me, to build that relationship so that I can do the best thing I can do to help them get a grant. So being open, being transparent, being honest of what the needs are of the organization are very critical. Funders know how to read through applications and see when things aren't in sync, and when an organization is trying to pull something across that's really not efficient, effective, or the budget numbers just don't add up. So be trustworthy of us, be honest with us, and develop that relationship with us as a funder. And we want to do the same thing with you as an organization.
Yeah. How about you, Nancy? Nancy, you've crafted a lot of pitches in your time, and I'm sure we'll be crafting a ton more. Where do you tell people to start with that pitch?
So I should say, let me start that I have worked at United Way for 12 years. And so I received pitches and gave pitches, which is really, really unique to United Way. And what I would emphasize, especially in the LGBT community, a lot of our organizations, they're afraid of coming in with hardcore research, data, and models. And I would really emphasize doing that. What are the issues that you're seeing, and do you have an interesting solution to that issue? And then what is your research or data or model that you're proposing? And be very clear about that. Sometimes, yes, you start off with that relationship you want to build with the program officer, but also give them something that they can pitch to their board or to their colleagues that, again, is backed by data, backed by best practice and research, so that they can be confident in really advocating for your proposal.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to tweak it a little bit. I hope you don't mind, Siobhan, for you. How do you factor in, as you are appealing to different folks to support Equality Ohio, how do you factor in just everything that's going on in Ohio right now? How much are you informed? Like, how much of your strategy is informed by, oh my God, another thing just happened?
A lot of it, Ken. We couldn't do our jobs because so much of our mission is pulled into many of the things, most of the things that we are seeing as a society and a culture right now. So I would say that Equality Ohio approaches this by telling our story. And that can be a very difficult thing for an organization like Equality Ohio to do. And particularly with LGBTQ issues in particular. And unfortunately, in our society, LGBTQ issues simply aren't understood in the way that we would want them to be in a very granular way. For example, we have a lot of LGBTQ representation in media, but that's not telling the true story of LGBTQ Ohioans who are more likely to live in poverty, who are more likely to suffer from health disparities. And so it is incumbent upon Equality Ohio to tell that story, because more often than not, we're not just talking to LGBTQ funders, we're talking to national, regional, statewide funders who don't necessarily specialize in LGBTQ issues, but do specialize in services for low income and marginalized individuals. And we have to tell the story of why LGBTQ people are in fact a marginalized group. That's not something that's well known. And then I'll speak to something that Nancy said about data. And that can actually be, is something I've been running up against my entire development career in LGBTQ world. And that is, there isn't good data for LGBTQ folks across the board. I mean, it just does not exist. We are not counted. And unless it's like a specialty survey specifically for LGBTQ folks. So when you're looking about data, about poverty, about access to childcare, about who's using free lunch, most of our institutions and systems are not disaggregating that data by sexual orientation or gender identity. And so therefore, it can be hard to tell those stories that you need to tell and to have that data to back up those programs. And so as LGBTQ development folks, we have to get very good at pulling together both hardcore data and statistics, as well as that more quantitative or qualitative data that we know from our lived experience of being out in the field with LGBTQ Ohioans every day and getting those stories.
And I feel like Siobhan is a plant to say that we actually have another one of these panels coming up in November called Counting Every Queer, where we're going to focus on assessment practices and generating data about the LGBTQ community in Ohio. So good teamwork there, Siobhan. Can I ask you one follow-up? I just have to imagine, this is me maybe just wanting to pull back the curtain a bit, that you have these appeals that you've crafted and then something happens. Right? Like because we spend a lot of time together and a lot of things keep happening here in Ohio. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of being nimble? And I have to imagine just pivoting on a dime.
Nimble is the name of the game at Equality Ohio, and building lots of space and flexibility into our work plans because we know something is going to happen. But I will say that sometimes it can be very difficult when we're working with funders who come into the funding space with ideas about what work needs to be done in any particular community and at any particular time. Whereas Equality Ohio, what work we're doing and what work has priority is very much driven by what's going on in our community. And unfortunately, who's under attack in our community right now. So right now, that would be our trans and non-binary youth are who we're focusing on. Thankfully, so when we see those shifts in focus for our work, we then look for funding to follow that. But if you know anything, funding following the work isn't nearly as great as having the funding in place to do the work, which is why general operating dollars are so important for nonprofits. And then also trust-based philanthropy. I just want to say that we at Equality Ohio have had the opportunity to build relationships with funders over a number of years, 5 to 10 years, and have these relationships such that when we saw our legislature do some things that we were not expecting this session, we were able to call certain funders funders and say, hi, we're having an emergency. These bills just dropped. This is not something that would have happened in Ohio 2-3 years ago. There was no way for us to be ready for this. Can you support us in this moment? And because of the relationship and because of the trust-based philanthropy, we were able to move dollars to that work, which should have been and was our priority at that moment.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to get to Andy's question in the chat before it scrolls up too far. And John and Nancy, as you've worked for, the Akron Community Foundation, the United Way, and I'm going to broaden it a little bit, Andy. How important it is that I would imagine you do get pitches from people outside, appeals from outside of state. How important is it that appeals come from in-state, or is the importance that it's affecting people in the state of Ohio? Do you want to start that one off, John?
Yeah, for our foundation and for the Gay Community Endowment Fund, we are geographic in focus. So our main emphasis is Summit County, sometimes Portage County, depending on the program, because we have funded some programs at Kent State University for their LGBT Student Center, for other programs, their mentoring programs. But it's got to impact, the money is being raised in our community, so those donors want the money to stay in our community. So if somebody calls me from out of state or from out of our area, I will do what I can do to help them find somebody in their local community who is a potential funder for them. I encourage them to call our friends at Candid all the time to have them help them come up with some alternative solutions. I'm not just going to say, no, we can't fund you and hang up the phone. So I try to be as accommodating as possible to share information with them that could help them on the road to finding some funds.
Thank you. And Nancy, the United Way was pretty geographic based. And
correct.
Yeah.
And it still is. And so same thing, that we would gear the individual to the right United Way that would possibly fund their proposal. And many local foundations are going to be the same way, that most of them are going to be there's a certain geographic location that they would fund. But then there are a list of some even local foundations that will fund in different states. You would just have to go on their website. So I would give the advice of go on the foundation's website, and on the website, it'll let you know whether or not they fund outside of the state or the city that they're located in. And it's surprising, even some of our small ones in town do fund programs out of state. So just go on their website, look at the criteria, and it'll let you know if they fund just locally or whatever geographic areas that they will actually provide funding for.
And they really, and getting at your follow-up question, Andy, they really do run the gamut, obviously as a fundraiser, as an executive director of a nonprofit as well, who's always seeking funding for our work. They really do run the gamut. Some say we'll take appeals from all over the place. Some say, it has to benefit Ohioans, and others say, yes, it has to benefit Ohioans. Also, I need the address that you are submitting from to be somewhere in Ohio. So it really is just questioning those criteria and in my experience, seeing where that goes.
Ken, I'll share one other resource if people don't know about it. It's an organization called Funders for LGBTQ Issues. Their website is lgbtfunders.org. It's a great resource for organizations that are looking for funds on a national level. There's even a section at the bottom of that gives you open opportunities for grant proposals from different funders in the U.S. So, and it has a lot of data, has a lot of resources there for people that are seeking money on exactly what to do. So I would encourage people, if they're not aware of it, to really get to know it.
Awesome, thank you. Siobhan, not a lot of people can say they know exactly where they were on February 4th, 2020. I do, because I was sitting in person with you doing a version of this panel in Columbus. And quite frankly, that was right before COVID just, really took off. And I don't remember a lot. The only thing that I remember with such clarity is you speaking about scarcity versus abundance. And really talking to the audience. And so I'm queuing you up again to do that, and certainly would love to hear Nancy and John talking about that as well. But often we hear organizations are in competition with each other, and there are this many LGBTQ organizations in Ohio, and so we have to get to this person and maybe not tell the other organization about them because, right? there's a competition, and I just remember you so clearly. I wouldn't say admonishing, but I received it that way happily, because I really was subscribing to that mindset as well, and it was a game changer for me. So can you speak again about scarcity versus abundance?
Absolutely. And I think this is especially possible within, smaller subgroups like LGBTQ funding or LGBTQ groups. And really the idea is that there's enough for all of us. It's just a matter of getting folks to the right resources and getting those resources dispersed. So as a development director, and honestly, we have this abundance mindset across the entire organization, where we believe that there are enough resources to fund the work that must get done. And so we're always looking for them, but with the belief that they're going to be there. And there are enough resources for Equality Ohio. There are enough resources for the LGBT Center of Cleveland, for all of these different organizations. We don't have to be in competition with one another. And that competition for dollars mindset, I think, often spills out into other parts of our work. And that's where it can really have a dangerous ripple effect of us thinking that we're in competition with one another, or that there can only be a single service provider for our community or a single place to go for our community. We have been raised to believe that way, that, there is a gay bar, there is a gay funder, there is a gay thing. And y'all, there's too many of us for that. There are too many of us in too many different spaces with too many different intersectional identities to believe that about ourselves and about our community. So just like we can have, multiple different things in so many different areas for our community, there is abundance here. And yes, all of our work can be funded and should be funded. And if we work together, we're going to get that funding. Us working together as nonprofits is actually going to attract more funding to the sphere, to the nonprofit sphere, to the LGBTQ funding sphere in particular. And so working together really is for all of our benefits.
Thank you. Nancy, do you want to speak to that about organizations working together in philanthropy?
Absolutely. But first, I really want to agree with Siobhan in terms of the resources that are available. When I was at United Way, Ohio was the second largest state in terms of donations that it received, only behind Texas. And it was because of all the oil that Texas had. So we are blessed in the fact that we have a state that is huge in terms of philanthropy and giving. But I also agree with collaboration. I think that there's a lot of opportunity if we learn how to work with like-minded organizations and really pull on each other's strengths. Sometimes we need to lead in some of the proposals and grants that we seek. Sometimes we're great supporters, and it's really understanding that rhythm and where do we lead, where do we support, and that there are enough dollars out there. We just, again, have to be open to partnership, collaboration, and understanding, keeping our finger on the pulse of what are the issues that are jumping up and that our funders are interested in, because we are a very diverse community. There are a lot of issues, and most times we can make the point that, hey, this is affecting us too. Let's tell you how COVID affected our senior population or our youth population. Let's tell you, now mental health is a really big topic. Oh, let's tell you about mental health and the LGBT youth community or the community in general. And there's stories to tell and ways that we can connect to like-minded organizations to seek those fundings to provide those services.
Thank you. And John, if you could bounce off of Mary's comment in the chat about funders really like collaborations with more than one organization. That's been your experience, I would imagine.
Absolutely. We look at grant proposals all the time, and the ones that are working with other organizations are the ones that are the strongest in the eyes of our committees, our Gay Community Endowment Fund, as well as other donors who may want to support that program. There are plenty of donors to go around. And we've seen the Giving USA data, and we know that individual giving is the way to go. And there are plenty of individual donors, as long as you get to know who they are and what their sweet spot is, and you know who those people are. It's those people who are giving you $25 a month or $25 a year who've been doing it consistently. Those are the people that you really want to cultivate, because you never know how much they might be able to give you. You never know how much they might be able to leave you in a bequest and an estate gift. Those are the ones that you want to focus on as well.
Thank you. Let's get some of the frustrations out of the way. Let's address them. Nancy, what are some of those ouch points, and how do we work through them in doing this work? What are some of those moments where you've said, that's a direct quote too, Nancy?
That I think I've used that quote a number of times myself. Sometimes it's when I feel frustrated that I didn't connect with the idea proposal I had with what the funder wanted to invest in, where, you know, like we just crossed paths. There seemed to be some miscommunication where you think you wrote a proposal that was spot on, and then the questions you get back are like, wow, I'm not really communicating the points that I thought I really clearly made. And so I think that's when don't get frustrated. There's times where that first year, that first proposal kind of missed the mark. Just don't give up on the relationship, on communication with the program officer, with the foundation, and just keep at it and say, okay, can you tell me how I can improve? Can you give me a little bit of feedback on what were the points that I missed? Was it my outcome evaluation? Was it that I didn't clearly state the approach to the service? And it might be that third time that you put in a proposal, but really trust working with the program officers, with the representatives of foundations, and you eventually, I think, will find that sweet spot where what you want to provide really hits the right tone with where the priorities are of the foundations.
Thank you. How about for you, John? What are some of those frustration obstacle points that you encounter in doing this work?
Yeah, I'll come at this from the foundation standpoint, as well as an individual who gets requests all the time. From the foundation standpoint, do your homework. Get to know who that funder is before you apply for a grant. Get to know what the average gift is for a gift from the Gay Community Endowment Fund. Don't come to us with the program, again, that's out of our geographic area. Again, we'll work with you. We'll try to steer you in the right direction. But when we get applications that are totally off base, asking for way more money than we even have to give, that tells us that they haven't done their homework. And we encourage people to do that. And again, pick up the phone and call those funders, because 9 times out of 10, they're very happy to talk to you. From an individual standpoint, I can tell you messaging matters. If you're doing an appeal, if you're doing even like a direct mail piece, make sure the messaging is accurate and consistent. I can't tell you how many times I get things here for my partner and I, and it doesn't have an inclusive language. It mentions husbands and wives. It mentions mothers and fathers, and not all households have mothers and fathers or the things that I mentioned. So make sure you get your messaging straight, because so many times we get things and they're not properly addressed, and that's a sore spot for me.
Can I also throw in that part of that messaging or the images that go along with those fundraising appeals? I am in shock, and also not at all in shock at how white the couples are in all of those images. And so that's a part of that messaging as well. How about for you, Siobhan, those frustration points?
Much like what Nancy said, when you feel like your program completely aligned with what a funder is looking for and hits all of their points, and then you just get a rejection, and you really feel like, oh, how did the stars not align there? I'm doing exactly what you're looking for. So that can definitely be a pain point. And I will tell you that having done this for 10 years now, I let go of those much more easily than I did. And again, it's back to the abundance mindset. Yeah. Excuse me, I think that was my watch. I definitely am much more able to say, okay, it wasn't our time. Those weren't our resources. Those resources were for someone else. Our resources are somewhere else. And, and then doing like what Nancy said about just because we send you a proposal and you reject it, if we're really interested in you as a funder and we are serious about the alignment that we have with your program, we're going to keep emailing you. we're going to send you updates on our work. We're going to let you know. We're going to build that relationship and help to educate the funder. So we are in the business of funder education, and we understand that that's a big part of what we have to do. So we are going to educate the funders about us, about the work we do and how it actually meets their goals, and then do another proposal the following year.
Nice. Okay, the frustrations are now behind us. Let's pivot to those fist in the air moments of just, my gosh, that all worked together beautifully. John, tell us about one of those experiences of someone applying for funding and it just all clicked together, and why that worked, where you felt good as a funder as well, which I would imagine happens quite a bit.
It does, and there are many examples that I could think of, but I think back about 3 years ago, and I see my friend Andra Pulaski's on the line on the call here. SUMA came to us and wanted us to fund first ever SUMA Pride Clinic here in Summit County, and they had all their ducks in a row. They were collaborating with all the key organizations that they needed to have on board. They had other donor support, which is really important. They weren't coming to us for all of the funding. And it was just one of those things where it was a no-brainer for us to do this, because we knew that the impact it was going to have on our community, on those members of the LGBT community who have a hard time finding a medical professional who will take them seriously or not reject them. So it was a perfect partnership. We continue to fund that today, and they continue to grow, and we couldn't be prouder of that relationship.
I love it. Siobhan, one of those fist in the air moments of like, oh, that was awesome.
I'm going to say the seed funding that we got from the Cleveland Foundation to launch the Equality Ohio Legal Clinic. So this is a legal clinic just for LGBTQ plus Ohioans. It is one of only 3 in the country. So you want to talk about going out on a limb and investing in something that's new and innovative. And we didn't have data. We didn't have data on the legal needs of LGBTQ Ohioans, but we had phone calls. We knew the phone calls that we were getting. We knew that the demand was there. And so based upon that data of the phone calls, Cleveland Foundation believed us and funded us to go create the data about the legal needs of LGBTQ Ohioans. So we were able to do surveys that really framed the establishment of the legal clinic and helped us determine those legal issues that we'd be helping folks with. So, shout out to the funders who are willing to go down a path of exploration, even if it's something new and innovative. And when there isn't the data, getting the funding to get the data so that we can understand if this is a problem, how big it is, and how best to address it.
I feel like maybe you spent a few hours putting that proposal together.
Many.
Betty.
Well, not even me. I have to give all the credit to Elena on that one. That was before my time.
I love it. How about you, Nancy? One of those you love telling stories about when philanthropy goes well.
So it goes back to when I was at United Way, and I found out that we had never funded directly the LGBT Center of Greater Cleveland. And so I reached out and started to work with the ED to figure out how we could make that happen. And it took a few years, but when I found the right connection and they turned in a very strong proposal and it was funded, it was a really proud moment for me, because I wanted to make sure that the United Way I worked at funded the LGBT community directly.
I love that. I love that. Can we talk a little bit about boards? So a couple questions came in about what should the board be doing? So we know that there are quite a few nonprofit boards in Ohio. Buckeye Flame certainly has a wonderful board, and Equality Ohio. There's so many amazing boards out there. Can you, Nancy, and Nancy is someone who sits on a few boards, talk to us about staff versus boards. Some staffs do have a development person and their board. The Buckeye Flame, we don't have a development person. We have our board. So it's a little bit of a different navigation. To what degree and how should a board be involved in this work?
The board should absolutely be fundraisers. Absolutely. No matter whether you have a development department or not. They're critical to fundraising. And it doesn't mean that it's just about the board members giving, but absolutely every board member should give something. It doesn't matter the amount, because many of the funders are going to ask, what is the giving rate of your board? So when you are going to be a part of a board, know that you should also be a donor of the organization that you're sitting on, number one. Also, know your connections and use your connections so that you can bring other resources to the organization that you're representing as a board member. It's very important to me. We're having a funders, a stakeholder breakfast next week, and it's sponsored because 2 board members reached out to where they work and got a sponsorship. So it's not always about individual giving as a board, but again, it really is about the connections you have in your community, and are you willing to bring those connections to bear on the organization that you're representing. So boards are very, very important to fund development, and regardless whether or not you have someone on staff, they should be participating in raising funds as well.
Awesome. Siobhan, boards, what do we do with them?
We use them. We engage them. Yeah, we don't have a set give get at Equality Ohio, but I do ask to be one of every board member's top 3 charities. So I don't care what your budget is, your philanthropic budget is. I just want to be one of your top 3 charities. And if you can make that commitment, then I am happy with that. I like to think of board members as doing the storytelling part of development work. When I was at Kaleidoscope Youth Center, it appalled me how many people didn't know of this amazing organization that had been around for 20 years when I was there, over 25 now. And I thought, we've got to get this story out. We're doing amazing work. And so really, board members are brand ambassadors. They are going out, they are telling your story so that by the time your proposal lands on someone's desk, they've already heard the name of your organization. They've already heard good things in the ether about your organization. I tease my board members. I tell them, I said, I want your friends running away from you when they see you walking into the bar, because they know that the only thing you want to talk about is Equality Ohio. That's how excited and how much of a brand ambassador I want my board members to be.
I am stealing that top 3 charities. When my board comes to you to complain, know that I stole it, and because you know most of my board members, and they're going to say something to you now. So, but I actually do. Can I push a little bit more on that? I think that part can be a little bit tricky, because so many of our board members are, like, half of our board members are executive directors of other nonprofits in Ohio, and so I don't know exactly what my question is there, Siobhan, just that can be tricky to navigate sometimes. Not in a bad way, just like, oh, how do we do that?
Yeah, I think I think it's about having, as a development director, having real conversations with your board members. And again, having that abundance mindset, not just with your staff, but with the board as well. And saying, and the reason it's your top 3 charities is that I want to be one of the folks that are top of your mind. At the end of the year, when you look at your budget, when you're going to do your taxes, when you're getting all those emails at the end of the year, I want you, there are a couple of charities that you're thinking, oh my gosh, should I give to them? Oh my gosh, like that is a priority in my life. So really that is, and it's not about the dollar amount. It's simply a reflection of the priority that this organization and this work has in your life. And here's the thing, I don't want you for the rest of your life. I'm asking us to be that level of priority during your board service. And then hopefully it just sticks there after 6 years. We've just got you, you're hooked and you're never leaving. But at least for that 6 years, we would like to be one of your top 3.
All right.
And Ken, I would also emphasize that especially if you want diversity on the board, I wouldn't put a certain limit that you had, or minimum that you had to donate. I would keep that open. It's about the act of having 100% giving from your board. But if you want diversity, if you want, for example, a student in college, they may not have the means, but they can maybe donate $20, and that should be fine. It's again about the fact that they are participating and that they are directly donating to the organization.
Thank you. John, anything to add on boards?
My colleague said it well, and we always kind of instruct our advisory boards that people don't give to organizations, people give to people. So what we want them to do is to open up doors to the people. And whether they're comfortable asking for the money, if they're not, we have staff that are willing to be the ones that ask for the money. That's really what we need them to do. We need them to open those doors for us. We need them to be advocates for the program, for the organization. One of the biggest things that we tried to get away with or get away from, and this isn't the case for all organizations, is events take a lot of time, and we try to discourage them from doing events. But as board members, they want to do things to create awareness of the organization. But we tell them one event. They're allowed to have one event. Fortunately, the Gay Community Endowment Fund has a very, very successful event that they do every year, the annual Sugar Plum Tour at Christmas time. But that takes a lot of work. And that takes a lot of work to raise over $100,000 when we could be working with one or two donors who could easily give $50,000 each if they have the inclination to do that. And that may be over one or two lunches. So we try to teach them that individual giving is the way to go, and not to really encourage them to do events. But we understand that some of them have to do it.
Okay, please invite me to those two lunches with those two funders. Thank you. That's wonderful. Can we do a little bit of introspection? I would love to hear, just like skills wise, what you've developed yourself as someone who's working in this area. We're always evolving and working on these skills, especially as COVID changed the game, and the Ohio legislature continues to change the game, and technology. I mean, but the Buckeye Flame derives a huge chunk of our fundraising from Facebook fundraisers that we weren't doing a few years ago. So I know I'm trying to work on my skills. Nancy, with regard to skills, what have you worked on? What has been benefiting you in doing this work?
It's really not to be afraid to use the passion and that I feel for the work that I'm trying to sell. So many times you want to make sure you have your ducks in order in terms of, again, research, data, best practices, and all of that is important. But at the end of the day, they're funding you too, and your organization and what you represent. And so you want to be able to bring that to the conversations you're having with your program officers. So don't be afraid to show the passion that you have for the work, for the belief you have in the work, because I think that really is just as important, again, as the research that you're also bringing along to show how important it is.
Thank you. John, what about those skills that you are constantly working on?
Yeah, I have been very fortunate in my professional career, which spans the last 35 years, to work for nonprofit organizations that I feel very passionate about. So I continue to work each and every day on making sure that passion never dies, making sure that I am making a difference each and every day, making sure that I am the leader that my team needs me to be, to help support them and to be the mentors that they need me to be, or to be the mentor that they need me to be as their supervisor. But every day thinking about the end result of, we're doing this to make the betterment of the community. And that's what kind of keeps me going each and every day, as well as being tenacious and a lot of those other tough words that you need to be as a fundraiser.
Which not everyone, it comes in their comfort zone of being tenacious. How do we work on that, John?
You just have to kind of continue to do it until you feel comfortable. Look for mentors, look for people who do it well, who can kind of mentor you and show you the ways to do it to make you feel comfortable. Start small, but then work your way up the ladder, and it usually pans out. I've seen a lot of fundraisers who were like that, and being able to coach them and mentor them and to kind of show them the ropes has really changed them. And now they're doing great jobs all throughout Northeast Ohio.
I've seen a couple people do it. I've seen a couple people work a room, and I'm like, I want to be like them. It was Siobhan and Mary Zoller. So I'm just putting that out there right now. Siobhan, talk about skills and working on skills that we all should be working on.
Well, I can do anything hybrid nowadays, and that's essentially our standard here at EO as a result of the pandemic. But I want to say that's a great skill that we have developed as an organization, because it allows for greater accessibility and inclusiveness. So I am very proud of that skill, that we can actually engage folks both in person. We've always been very skilled at that, but we have built the skill of engaging folks via Zoom, because we knew that during the pandemic, our community actually actually needed us more. And so there was not an option to shut down or to not engage with the community. And so very much, while the plane was flying, we had to build that skill. And I think we've gotten very good at it, and just having hybrid events that really meet people where they are. I think that our skill of seeing accessibility needs, recognizing accessibility needs, and recognizing opportunities for greater inclusivity in the events that we build, in our programming that we're building, are things that have just been great coming out of the pandemic.
I appreciate that compliment, Mary Zoller, but I can work a room until I have to ask for money, and then I run away and cry. So it's that last piece where I'm like, nope, gotta go. What about some of those resources? What are some of those resources that we should know out there in the World Wide Web? Certainly, Bentley, thanks you for the shout out about the importance of getting a mentor. What are some of your go-to resources, Siobhan, that you're like, yeah, everybody should know about these?
Well, I absolutely love the Williams Institute. And someone mentioned it in the chat, I will tell you, we're actually working with the Williams Institute. And if you want data on the LGBTQ community in the United States, the Williams Institute really is the go-to place. The Trevor Project for information about LGBTQ youth. We also, NCTE, National Center for Transgender Education, and then a number of other places. I really love Nonprofit AF. And it used to be called Nonprofit with Balls, and now it's Nonprofit AF. It's a really great blog by Vu Le, who is a fundraiser up in the Northwest of the United States, a fundraiser of color, and really comes at philanthropy and fundraising and development from the perspective of being a fundraiser of color, and how we are more inclusive and equitable within the field of fundraising. And then the last one I'm going to throw out there is community-centric fundraising. It is a wonderful newer resource. They were just established over the past 2 years, really just here out of the pandemic. I love their approach to fundraising. It is a little bit different than you're going to find from, let's say, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, but I really like their take on it because it centers communities and community needs. And that's something that I think is particularly of need for the LGBTQ community.
Thank you. John, some of those go-to resources, I know you said a few already.
Yeah, definitely the funders for LGBTQ issues, as well as our friends at Candid and my fellow Plexus board member, Brian Schultz, is a great resource to kind of bounce ideas off of. But also, I mean, joining organizations like the Association of Fundraising Professionals, making the commitment to get your certified fundraising executive certification. Those are all things that can help a fundraiser advance their career, learn more about the profession, and really to develop that passion that they should have when they're raising money for their organization. So I still keep my CFRE current, even though I'm not doing direct fundraising. I feel it's important. I worked really hard to pass that test, and I'm not giving it up. So I encourage people to do that. It's not that difficult.
Awesome. Nancy, any resources that you want everybody to know?
Well, one suggestion that I would make, because I think Siobhan covered many great resources, and I usually do the same thing, that when I'm looking for particular evidence, data, I look at some of the national organizations, and then the census is actually a great friend, because then what you have to do is localize and be a little creative in how you present data by taking national databases and then using the census to then make statements about what should be happening locally. So again, don't be afraid to be creative in taking different sources and then making a local case for your ask.
Awesome, thank you. And there you go. Yeah, the Movement Advancement Project, absolutely. A question came in as we were doing this, and so I'm springing this on any one of you that might have comments on this. Talk to us about corporate funding and working with corporate. How do you navigate that? I think, what was it? It was Newsweek earlier in the year had that article. It might not have been Newsweek. A publication had an article earlier in this year about how only a fraction of the monies dedicated towards diversity initiatives after the murder of George Floyd actually were spent, that all of these companies committed to diversity related funding. And it was only like, I don't want to put a number there unless one of you knows it, but it was a fraction was actually spent. You talked earlier, all of you, about individual donors and the importance of individual donors. What about corporations and working on that corporate side? Someone want to take that one?
I'll say it depends on the corporation. I mean, it really is corporation dependent. I wouldn't say that you can say there's one way that corporations fund, because there are a lot of different ways, a lot of different ways that corporations have set themselves up. Many of them have foundations, and then the foundations will fund one body of work, and then the corporation itself might do event sponsorships or fund a different body of work. Now, I do want to shout out Eaton, if I'm allowed to do that, and working with their foundation and the ability. So I would say more than corporations, I'm more interested in corporate foundations, right? And that's what I would tell folks to look at, is look at those corporate foundations. Look at who's based in your area that you might not know. There are a lot of these kind of background organizations. Ohio is home to so many different corporations that aren't kind of these marquee intel or, things that we're seeing there, that are actually willing to provide support because they have a plant there, because there just is a physical presence. I will say that corporations have, I think, across the board, moved to a physical presence model, and they want to benefit the communities that their employees live in. That's another thing corporations have started doing. If there is a corporation you're interested in, see if they have an ERG, if they have an LGBTQ ERG. Does their money flow through the ERG, or does the ERG give recommendations about who the foundation funds? Really figure out how that corporation is working that. But I am seeing a lot more corporations go to where they are looking at what their employees' interests are, where their employees live, and what their employees want to fund.
Yeah, another great way to find them. Are they marching in pride? So if they're behind a banner, they're in pride, there's some base commitment, and making that pitch of pride is a wonderful thing to fund. Also, there are 364 other days too of work that are happening, which pride, of course, we're working on all year long. Anything else on corporations or working with corporate partners, Nancy or John?
I would just
go ahead,
Go ahead,
Nancy.
John.
No, you go ahead.
I would just agree that start with the corporations that either have headquarters or a huge presence in your area, and then reach out. The foundations you can develop relationships with the foundations. If you go directly to, say, an executive of a corporation, it's much more difficult. You tend to have a bigger payoff if you start with the foundations and you start with corporations that are local. And again, if they have a headquarters in the region, start there.
Nice. John?
And I was going to add, you asked a question earlier about the role of the board. This is a great role for the board to help you get in the door of local companies who are very philanthropic, whether it be their foundation or just a company in general. Again, those people give to people. And if one person asks, more than likely, hopefully they would support another person's initiative. So have your board members engaged in that process. They may not ask for the money, but they may open the door for you to be able to make the pitch on your own.
Awesome, thank you. I want to end on, I mean, we've been touching on this over the past hour, and this has been wonderful. And you can see the comments in the chat of the appreciation there. And I'm sure of people watching this on YouTube, where we will post it, and on Facebook. Can we just end in talking about the relationship between mission and philanthropy, and let's just bludgeon this one. We've been talking about it all hour long, but it's just such an important place to end. I actually say this from the perspective, I was the president of a board of a nonprofit, a pretty major nonprofit here in Cleveland, where not an LGBTQ one, where we really abandoned our mission and started chasing where the money was available, to the point where the mission got so diluted that the organization, which was a pretty historic 30-40 year organization here in Cleveland, is pretty much not in existence anymore. And so I don't want to discount the fact that, yes, of course, we want to chase where money's available, but there's a real cost in abandoning mission in doing that. Can we start with you, John? Just talk a little bit about the importance of mission in doing this work.
Yeah, that mission is there for a reason, and your board developed that mission for a reason. We try to talk to organizations all the time who are straying from that mission to really come back to their roots, to come back to why are they in existence, and hopefully we'll be able to convince them that that was there for a reason, and the money, even though it may help the organization, it's one of those things where you just have to kind of put that aside and continue to work for the ultimate mission of the organization.
Thank you. Nancy, mission, is it important?
Absolutely. Just finished a strategic plan, just freshened up our mission. And it really is your stake in the ground. It's your niche. It's why you exist. And if you start to chase the money, when those it can really easily turn on you. And all of a sudden you see your organization has thinned out. And next thing you know, you're going to have to make some really tough decisions and decide, who are we again? So I would always advise, stick with your mission, live your mission, and don't stray, don't chase the dollars, because in the long run, it really hurts you. And it really dilutes your message to the community and to the funders. So really be true to the mission. It is your stake in the ground.
Awesome. Thank you. This has been wonderful. And I'm so appreciative for all of you. And also, it's so important that we use every opportunity that we have when we're in front of people. So if you would like to support Equality Ohio, you can run right on over to equalityohio.org. To support Starting Point, please go on over to starting-point.org. And of course, the Akron Community Foundation, you would go to akroncf.org. You can, of course, go on over to thinkplexus.org if you want to support Plexus, our partner in this event. And the Buckeye Flame would always be happy to welcome your support over there on the is very important to us, the Buckeye Flame, and for us it's thebuckeyeflame.com. Siobhan, John, Nancy, so appreciative for your time and your work in this area, and we know it from the chat, and we know it moving forward. Your perspective and your advice is just invaluable in us working together to do this work. Thank you so much.
Ken, you just made an ask and you said you get scared away by doing that, so well done.
I will edit this part out.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.